gentlemen, dear colleagues, already it has been a year since our last side event on the theme of moving from autism awareness to autism acceptance, and today, as every year on 2nd April, the UN again observes World Autism Awareness Day. Once more, this day coincides with a session of your committee, and we are pleased to welcome you to another commemorative side event, this time concerned with Article 15 of the CRPD, namely medical experimentation on autistic children, fake cures, and global stem cell tourism. The speakers today are myself, Erich Kofmel, founder and president of Autistic Minority International, a Geneva-based NGO run by and for autistic persons seeking to advance the interests of the autistic community at the global political level, as well as Alexandra Mapurunga and Douglas Sipp. With Alexandra Mapurunga, we are facilitating once more the remote participation of an autistic self-advocate who cannot be here in person today. Alexandra is the president of ABRACA, the Brazilian Association for Action on the Rights of Autistic Persons. We will be playing an audio file of his speech in which he will talk about the situation of autistic persons in Brazil, including brain surgery and other invasive and experimental treatments for autistic children there. We are unsure at this time whether or not Alexandra is able to follow the live webcast, as it was organized at fairly short notice and it's night in Brazil. If yes, and he can follow what is happening here, he will be able to answer questions of the committee that the committee members may have via online chat. Thanks to the International Disability Alliance for providing the webcast once more. Douglas Sipp is a research specialist and former head of the Science Policy and Ethics Studies Unit at Riken Center for Developmental Biology in Kobe, Japan. He is a leading expert on the global market for unproven stem cell treatments, and we are privileged to have him. We encourage you to focus your attention and questions on him, as he is only here today, and he, better than anyone, will be able to provide you with a sound understanding of the mechanisms underlying stem cell tourism and the global proliferation of stem cell clinics targeting the parents of autistic children with treatments that are neither medically indicated nor scientifically validated. Hundreds of stem cell clinics operate worldwide, offering treatments for autism and many other conditions and disabilities. Health authorities in many countries have prohibited such treatments, but regulatory oversight is weak and global stem cell tourism is booming. Desperate and misguided parents of autistic children will stop at nothing trying to cure autism. Autistic self-advocates, on the other hand, view autism not as something to be cured, but as a lifelong neurological difference that is equally valid. To start off, however, we would like to briefly share with you the joint statement on the rights of autistic persons by the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to health and the Special Rapporteur on the rights of persons with disabilities, released on occasion of World Autism Awareness Day 2015. They write, quote, "Discrimination against autistic persons, the rule rather than the exception. Two United Nations human rights experts today called for an end to discrimination against autistic persons and a celebration of diversity. Speaking ahead of World Autism Awareness Day, the Special Rapporteurs on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Catalina de Vandas Aguilar, and on the right to health, Danius Puras, noted that about 1% of the world's population, some 70 million people, is estimated to be on the autism spectrum worldwide. As part of human diversity, autistic persons should be embraced, celebrated, and respected. However, discrimination against autistic children and adults is more the rule rather than the exception. In many countries, autistic persons lack access to services which would support on an equal basis with others their right to health, education, employment, and living in the community. When available, services are too often far from human rights friendly or evidence-based. Autistic persons are particularly exposed to professional approaches and medical practices which are unacceptable from a human rights point of view. Such practices, justified many times as treatment or protection measures, violate their basic rights, undermine their dignity, and go against scientific evidence. Autistic children and adults face the proliferation of medicalized approaches relying on the overprescription of psychotropic medications, their placement in psychiatric hospitals and long-term care institutions, the use of physical or chemical restraints, electroimpulsive therapy, etc. This may be particularly harmful and lead to the deterioration of their condition. All too often, such practices amount to ill treatment or torture. The autism spectrum should be understood from a broader perspective, including in research. We call for caution about enthusiastic attempts to find the causes of autism and ways to cure autism through sophisticated but not necessarily ethical research. Autism as a condition is a critical challenge for modern health systems, in which we need to ensure that the practice and science of medicine is never again used to cause the suffering of people. More investment is needed in services and research into removing societal barriers and misconceptions about autism. Autistic persons should be recognized as the main experts on autism and on their own needs, and funding should be allocated to peer support projects run by and for autistic persons. It is about providing individuals and families with the necessary skills and support to have choice and control over their lives. It is also about equal opportunities, access to inclusive education, and mainstream employment to achieve equality and rights enjoyment by autistic persons. It is about promoting their independence and respecting their dignity. Autistic persons should be respected, accepted, and valued in our societies, and this can only be achieved by respecting, protecting, and fulfilling their basic rights and freedoms." Unquote. We would like to express our thanks and gratitude to Catalina de Vandas Aguilar, the Special Rapporteur on Disability, and Dr. Dainius Puras, the Special Rapporteur on Health, for this important statement in support of our rights as autistic persons. Before we proceed to hear about global stem cell tourism, the marketing of unproven stem cell treatments to parents of autistic children, and medical experimentation on autistic children without their consent in stem cell clinics the world over, please allow us to appraise you of some other harmful and abusive fake autism cures that are marketed to parents of autistic children worldwide via the Internet. All fake autism cures are based on misinformation, cultish belief, and mostly disproved assumptions about the origins of autism. Fact is, autism is both genetic and hereditary. It is possible that some environmental factors also play a role. For more than a decade, a large number of parents has bought into a by now thoroughly discredited and refuted theory that autism is caused by childhood vaccines. That's the starting point for an abusive treatment called chelation, a chemical way to strip mercury arguably contained in such vaccines from autistic children's blood, but removing all metals, including calcium, in the process, which has led to the death of at least one autistic child. According to the Mayo Clinic in the United States, quote, "Chelation therapy is not an effective autism treatment, and it may be dangerous. There's no evidence of a link between mercury exposure and autism. In addition, chelation therapy can be associated with serious side effects, including potentially deadly liver and kidney damage," unquote. The fact that any link between autism and vaccines has been discredited by an expert panel of the World Health Organization in 2002 has not silenced anti-vaccine activists, among them parents and doctors, and the chelation treatment continues to be carried out on autistic children everywhere as if they had lead poisoning. When chelation doesn't work, as is to be expected, parents of autistic children may move on to even worse forms of medical experimentation, such as chemical castration. The mistaken belief behind this treatment is that a child's levels of testosterone must be interfering with the chelation agents and render those chemicals ineffective. To bring testosterone levels down, autistic children are given multiple high doses of Lupron, a drug also used to chemically castrate sex offenders. The inventor of this pseudo-treatment opened clinics and franchises throughout the United States before more recently losing his medical license in several US states. Other doctors still offer the same protocol. The Chicago Tribune newspaper reported in 2009 that, quote, 4 of the world's top pediatric endocrinologists told the Tribune that the Lupron protocol is baseless, supported only by junk science. More than 24 prominent endocrinologists dismissed the treatment earlier this year in a paper published online by the journal Pediatrics. Experts in childhood hormones warn that Lupron can disrupt normal development, interfering with natural puberty and potentially putting children's heart and bones at risk, unquote. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HBOT, is commonly used to treat decompression sickness in divers, carbon monoxide poisoning, and burns resulting from heat or fire. It is not a cure or appropriate treatment for autism. Nevertheless, proponents of HBOT for autism claim that it removes heavy metals from autistic children's bodies, reduces inflammation in the gut, and re-energizes brain cells. HBOT involves breathing pure oxygen in a pressurized chamber. The atmospheric pressure is increased to 3 times higher than normal, allowing the lungs to absorb 3 times more oxygen. Injured human tissues may require these levels of oxygen to heal, but there is no scientific validation linking autism to a lack of access to oxygen for a child's tissues. Following reports of clinics offering parents of autistic children HBOT, and even of parents renting or buying their own hyperbaric chambers to treat their autistic children themselves, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration released a strongly worded statement in 2013 saying that, quote, no, HBOT has not been clinically proven to cure or be effective in the treatment of autism. FDA is concerned that some claims made by treatment centers using HBOT may give consumers a wrong impression that could ultimately endanger their health. Patients receiving HBOT are at risk of suffering an injury that can be serious, such as paralysis or air embolism. Since hyperbaric chambers are oxygen-rich environments, there is also a risk of fire, unquote. To date, HBOT has resulted in about 80 deaths worldwide. Currently, the autistic community pays much attention to yet another fake autism cure, chlorine dioxide, sold under the name Miracle Mineral Solution, or MMS. This chemical miracle cure, which consists of toxic industrial-strength bleach, is meant to remove non-existent parasites from autistic children's intestines and flush out vaccines. Autistic children are forced to either swallow bleach, or they are bathed in it or injected with it via the rectum, often multiple times a day. Referring specifically to MMS, chelation, and HBOT, the FDA stated in 2014, quote, there is no cure for autism, so products or treatments claiming to cure autism do not work as claimed. The same is true for many products claiming to treat autism. Some may carry significant health risks, unquote. All of these treatments should be considered medical experimentation on autistic children without their consent. You may think that surely something called Miracle Mineral Solution as a cure for autism and a wide array of other conditions must be a fringe phenomenon. Not at all. A man in the United States is facing criminal charges in relation to selling, importing, and manufacturing MMS over a period of several years. Others who believe in MMS set up a legal defense fund for him on a crowdfunding website. Since December 2014, a total of almost 2,200 people have pledged a combined $123,000 for that man's defense. There are hundreds of pro-MMS Facebook groups in all languages with tens of thousands of likes. A book detailing an MMS treatment protocol for autism that was self-published by the author, an American-born woman from Mexico with no medical qualifications, has more than 400 reviews and ranks at number 35 for all books relating to autism on Amazon.com, indicating very substantial sales. Sellers of MMS falsely claim that it cures not only autism, but anything from cancer to Ebola, diabetes, malaria, and HIV/AIDS. The side effects include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, severe dehydration, skin rashes, eroding nails, hair loss, gum disease, dangerously low sodium and blood pressure, and in the long run, liver and kidney damage. Parents are instructed not to seek medical help for high fevers, as they are considered good for detoxing the body. Fever-induced seizures are encouraged because, as parents are told, they help to reset the brain. Parents are urged to examine their autistic children's excrements for signs of worms and parasites. What may look like worms, however, upon closer examination, turns out to be pieces of intestines, stomach lining, or soft tissue from mouth or esophagus, shed because of the corrosive and poisonous nature of MMS. Whether chelation, chemical castration, HBOT, or MMS, subjecting autistic children to any or all of these torturous fake cures is nothing short of child abuse. Desperate and misguided parents of autistic children are preyed upon by a growing worldwide industry offering unsubstantiated and dangerous treatments that defy medical plausibility. Unlike other fake cures, MMS is cheap and available online without any need to ever see a doctor. No prescription is required. No professional ever gets to advise those parents against using bleach on their autistic child. Albeit the sale of MMS has been banned in a number of countries, such as Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and recently Germany, and there have been police raids, for example in Ireland, ordering MMS online and having it shipped from overseas is easy. Let's now move on to Alexander Mapurunga and listen to him speak about the situation of autistics in Brazil. I'm playing an audio file he recorded for this side event.
Good morning. My name is Alexander Mapurunga. I'm president of ABRACA, the Brazilian Association of Rights of Persons with Autism. ABRACA is made by autistic persons, families, and human rights defenders to promote and defend the human rights of autistic people in consistence of CRPD. I'd like to take the opportunity to discuss the persons with autism issues in the CRPD committee in that very special date, which many times is used more to raise misconceptions than to promote human rights. For instance, one of our concerns is about the widely spread campaign that says the autism is more common than AIDS, diabetes, and cancers, and forget that autistic people also have cancer, diabetes, and AIDS, and face barriers to get treatments, which needs to be addressed. Well, in Brazil, the CRPD, it was ratified in 2008, and we have an autism federal law, which was put in place in 2012, recognized that autistic persons are persons with disabilities and subject of protection against discriminations based on disabilities. However, among the society, the medical and the families and many times the policy makers when regards to autism. For not believing in inclusion, some groups of family trying to advocate to restrain the rights of persons with autism to inclusive education, for instance, or to have access to public mental health, for instance. Unfortunately, I've not heard cases of persons with autism hidden in their communities or living under conditions of extreme negligence. With the hope of the cure, parents will to use experimental and sometimes harmful methods. One of them we have noticed is the brain surgery to contain aggressivity, and which cause irreversible damage to the person. The federal government has promised to improve the offers and the quality of rehabilitation services, which have been moving very slowly. We have in Brazil, there is a lack of free and appropriate rehabilitation services for autistic persons. Without the public and regulated services, the family are subject to pay high price for diagnosis and treatments, not always committed to the scientific ethics and with the dignity of the persons with autism. Brazil still have asylum similar institutions where living autistic persons away from the communities. With laws or legislations and the Article 19 of CRPD. We have a national program of inclusive residence, but the municipalities have been building just a few units of them. We have concern that residence inclusive eventually become small institutions not in accordance with the CRPD Article 19. There is no personal assistance service to ensure that support at home when necessary as required by Article 19 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Would be necessary that government provide that such service. Regarding to Article 24, education, since the adoption of the National Policy of Education, inclusive education, in 2008, Brazil has advanced a lot to ensure access to children with disability, including autistic children, to regular education. However, in many states of Brazil, despite the federal law, the federal policy, and the Article 24 of CRPD, persists a segregated education for children with disability. Last year, it was approved the plan education, the National Plan of Education, and his goal in favor of segregated education of children with disability, which caused great worry among the TPOs and organizations which defend of inclusive and human rights of persons with disabilities. The families from all over Brazil have reported difficult to obtain the reasonable accommodation as personal assistance in the school environment. Also, the private schools continue to discriminate against children with autism, denying enrollment and charge extra fee for acceptance. I'd like to thank the Autistic Minority and the CRPD committee for that opportunity. Thank you very much.
That was Alexander Mapurunga. He may be able to say more about the topic of this session, which in this case would be, in the case of Brazil, brain surgery for autistic children during the question round, but he is not yet in the online chat, so I guess he is probably asleep. Another market that drives on the internet is that for unproven stem cell treatments for autism and many other conditions and disabilities. Douglas Sipp will talk to you about this. Please, Doug.
Thanks very much for the kind introduction. And it's my great honor and pleasure to be here and addressing the distinguished members of the committee on this topic of unproven stem cell-based interventions for autism. The marketing and sale of so-called stem cell treatments is an international phenomenon that has prompted serious concern among scientists, clinicians, regulators, and advocacy groups. This global phenomenon is characterized by the direct-to-consumer advertisement of unproven treatments or therapies that are described as containing or taking effect on human stem cells. Although blood-forming or hematopoietic stem cells have been used effectively in the treatment of certain disorders of the blood and immune system for decades, and emerging evidence points to the efficacy of specific somatic stem cell types in the regeneration of epithelial tissues, such as cornea, for most human health conditions, the safety and efficacy of stem cell-based interventions remains undetermined. Despite this lack of evidence, over the past 10 years, a global industry has emerged which makes extraordinary claims about the clinical benefits of stem cell transplants and infusions for an extremely broad spectrum of health conditions and quality of life issues. These range from life-threatening conditions such as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and Parkinson's disease to manageable but incurable conditions such as diabetes and spinal cord injury, to less debilitating conditions such as hair loss and impotency and even cosmetic surgery. Frequently, patients and their families are encouraged by providers of such unproven stem cell interventions to pay thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars to travel internationally, to take on significant physical risks and financial burdens, and waive many of their fundamental legal rights in order to obtain access. The scale of the industry is difficult to measure due to its opacity, its extreme volatility, its underregulated status, and the inherent unreliability of the companies and individuals involved. But most current estimates suggest that several hundred commercial entities now advertise stem cell products and procedures online, and that tens of thousands of people have undergone unproven stem cell interventions. When the recipient of such an intervention is a consenting adult, many would consider it to be based on informed autonomous decision-making. However, when the recipient is a child, the dynamic shifts dramatically. In this talk, I will focus on one such group of stem cell recipients, young people on the autistic spectrum who are taken to stem cell clinics by their caretakers. After outlining the underlying forces that have made unproven stem cell treatment such a widespread and profitable industry, I will examine known risks of stem cell interventions, the evidence basis for the clinical use of stem cells in persons with autism, regulatory efforts that have been made to curtail the exploitation of vulnerable healthcare consumers, and some of the legal and ethical issues specific to the provision of such interventions to a pediatric population. The marketing of unproven stem cell treatments is an overdetermined phenomenon. The rise of the internet as a source of medical information and an unrestrained advertising medium, the normalization of medical travel, the public anticipation of future clinical breakthroughs using stem cell technologies, patient activism and empowerment, renewed openness to alternative medicine, skepticism of state regulation, underdeveloped legal and scientific infrastructure, and the privileging of private sector over public sector activities in many countries have all contributed to the willingness of patients to travel for medical purposes and the inability of governments to effectively regulate the globalized healthcare system. Stem cells, which remain an immature and inadequately tested suite of prospective clinical biotechnologies, have rapidly entered this global market, additionally fueled by media hyperbole, medical myth-making on the part of companies, and excessively optimistic future-looking claims by scientists and entrepreneurs. Academic organizations active in this field of research, notably the International Society of Stem Cell Research and the International Society for Cell Therapy, have engaged in major public education and advocacy efforts, highlighting the potential risks and harms of unregulated and unproven stem cell interventions. But the lure of supposedly cutting-edge medical technology has proven resistant to voices of concern. Their apparent popular appeal notwithstanding, the risks of stem cell-based interventions remain a particularly difficult question. Of course, medical risk is typically measured as a trade-off against more or less well-known degree of efficacy. The question of risk for most stem cell treatments is, in an important sense, moot. Without understanding whether a treatment is effective, it is impossible to gauge whether the associated risks are tolerable. That said, there have been a number of reports of serious adverse events subsequent to injection, infusion, or transplantation of stem cells. These include formations of tumors in the brain, spine, and kidney, pulmonary embolism, cerebral vascular accident or stroke, locked-in syndrome, encephalitis, meningitis, serious infections, and death. Importantly, these reports are not from scientific studies on the known risk of teratoma formation on subcutaneous transplantation of human embryonic stem cells, but of actual cases in which somatic or so-called adult stem cells have been introduced into the body in the course of a medical intervention. Regulatory authorities in many countries have begun to respond to the threat to patient safety, public health, and the integrity of healthcare systems that are posed by unproven stem cell treatments. In the United States, federal and state authorities have made arrests, undertaken delicensure proceedings, obtained injunctions against domestic providers. In the EU, the governments of the Netherlands, United Kingdom, Germany, and Italy have all pursued criminal or civil cases against stem cell clinics. In Asia, China implemented a ban on new clinical research and stem cell clinical research in an effort to deter the illicit sale of stem cell interventions, and Japan has strengthened its oversight of medical practices offering cell-based interventions. And notably, in many parts of the developing world, there is an increasing awareness of the medical and reputational risks associated with lax regulation of stem cell providers. Nonetheless, despite these signs of heightened regulatory vigilance, the delivery of stem cell treatments goes on unabated due to the ability of providers to game the legal system, evade oversight through regulatory arbitrage and capture, and escape enforcement actions by crossing national borders or sending patients to partner clinics in other countries. The marketing of so-called autism treatments, described as involving injections or infusions of stem cells, is one example of how an unproven intervention can be aggressively marketed with seeming immunity from regulatory control. In the case of autism, the etiology of which remains poorly understood and controversial, and is likely multifactorial, the egregiousness of claims made for supposed stem cell treatments is compounded by the fact that recipients are typically minors, unable to make autonomous healthcare decisions. The rationales provided by private clinics for such interventions typically hinge on hypotheses about the pathogenesis of autism, such as that it is attributable to hypoperfusion or insufficient blood supply to the brain, or to inflammation of the brain or gut. In such cases, the idea is to use stem cells to deliver a poorly defined cocktail of molecular factors intended to exert angiogenic or anti-inflammatory effects. The cell types and delivery methods used vary from clinic to clinic, but reports of allogeneic and autologous bone marrow, cord blood, and adipose-derived putative mesenchymal stem cells are common, as are cells obtained from aborted fetuses. These may be delivered intravenously or injected into the spinal column. Other companies have rebranded the decades-old and thoroughly debunked practice of selling lyophilized or freeze-dried fetal animal cells as an alternative form of so-called stem cell treatment. Such fresh cells may be delivered directly by a practitioner or sold by mail order for home use. While some practitioners at stem cell clinics do hold medical licenses, many are unlicensed or specialize only in alternative medical practices such as naturopathy or homeopathy. In many cases, clinics advertising such interventions use the language of experimentation, describing their interventions as investigational, unapproved, or delivered in the context of a clinical study, while still charging large sums for participation in such experiments. This pay-to-participate model of medical experimentation not only shifts financial burdens from trial sponsors to research subjects, but introduces a number of problematic features that severely undermine the scientific validity of the medical experiment. As a general principle of medical ethics, the safety and welfare of human research subjects is of primary importance. By confusing language suggestive of medical care with that of clinical research, clinics marketing unproven stem cell interventions unnecessarily complicate decision-making and solicit unfounded expectations about the risks and benefits of participating in poorly designed, for-profit human medical experiments. The problem is exacerbated even more in situations in which the recipient is not considered competent due to age or other conditions to make autonomous, responsible healthcare decisions, as is the case for many of those persons with autism who receive ostensible stem cell transplants. For these reasons, the marketing and provision of interventions of unknown safety and efficacy for a condition of unknown etiology, for which in any case the concept of therapeutic intervention may be unwarranted, represents a serious ethical breach and violation of the rights of autistic persons and their families. Nevertheless, a number of clinics, including many located in the Caribbean and Latin America, have begun to specialize in the sale of spurious stem cell treatments targeting the families of children with autism. One clinic in Panama has been advertising experimental stem cell interventions for autism for more than 5 years, since it was forced to close its business in Costa Rica by the Ministry of Health in that country. Multiple sites in Mexico are conducting so-called clinical trials using bone marrow or fat-derived stem cells for autism. In the Dominican Republic, despite an official announcement in 2011 by the Public Health Ministry that commercial offering of unproven stem cell treatments is illegal, at least one clinic continues to advertise such interventions online, targeting mainly overseas families. There is clearly a large market for unproven medical interventions. People with health concerns are particularly vulnerable to exploitation through inflated claims. For this reason, regulatory authorities need to take firm action against the commercial purveyors of such claims to deter abuses of the kind now affecting a growing number of persons with autism and their families. Patient education campaigns are ineffective when not coupled with strictly enforced penalties for clinics that violate local laws and international standards. The unproven stem cell industry has been operating with virtual impunity for over a decade, exposing thousands to unnecessary and unjustifiable physical risks and financial burdens. The time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. It is maybe important to also stress that stem cell tourism is not one-directional. We know of at least one case in which a prominent broadcast journalist from the Philippines took her autistic son for stem cell treatments to Germany, and the Philippine media reported about it approvingly. As we heard, it is also possible for parents to buy stem cells online and have them shipped frozen to their home. The price for this can be $5,000 as opposed to the price of a single treatment at a clinic that can range in the tens of thousands. If stem cells decay during transport, however, little fragments and debris will get trapped in the child's bloodstream and can cause a stroke or inflammatory reaction in the brain. Even more unbelievable, parents can buy cheaply bottles of shark or sheep stem cells online and have their autistic child drink them. That said, we are now ready for questions from committee members. Are there any questions? Mr. Yu?
Yeah, wait, hello, yeah. Thank you very much. And also, I'm very interested in the issues concerning the autism because one of my classmates had a son, and also he told me that when he was around 18 years old, it is hard for my classmate to control his son. Sometimes, my classmates had to stay together in the night with the son in a car outside the room because sometimes, the son cried or something like, or shout or something like that. It is hard for him to control his son. So his son had a, as you mentioned, brain surgery. Now perhaps it has come down. So, and also, in China, the autistic persons has already included into persons with disabilities, and also we are focusing on the research and also it's an issue arising from the autism. So so there are some questions, and the first is what the cause of the autism. It seems it is internationally a problem, and also in China. For instance, I work at the China Disabled Persons Federation, and the rehabilitation department of this federation have a cooperation with Harvard or other universities focused on the research and the treatment. Now it seems that we cannot find the real cause of the autism. This is the first. And also, before I came here, I noticed from the newspaper that some experts say that perhaps, one element of it is the air pollution. When the pregnant woman live in a polluted environment, it is easier for them to have a autism person born. So this is another information. So, and my second question is that what's the right direction or what the right treatment for autism persons? That just now you mentioned. I'm sorry that I came here. I didn't catch what you said at the beginning, but at least you mentioned that the stem cells is not the direct the wrong. It's not the right direction for the treatment. So what's the comparatively good practice or treatment concerning the autism? Because also, one of my relatives also has a son with autism. And also I noticed that in China, most of the autism persons have a comparatively educated parents. So how to, all the parents, it is not the problem of money, it's how they can find the right direction for their children. So that is the problem. So third, and I hope that you can give me some contact information that in case, the Department of Rehabilitation from my federation would like to communicate the information with you or to conduct some research and get the right direction for that, and we would like to share the information with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yu. I see one more question by Ms. Stegner. I think we have to finish after that. I'm told we will try to answer very briefly and then maybe liaise with people after the event directly to answer the more complex questions, such as the one by Mr. Yu, that we just don't have the time to answer in detail right now.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that you have held this side event. It's very interesting, and as a country rapporteur for Brazil, I would be very much interested in getting that statement from your Brazilian colleague as a background document for my research on Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Degner. Are there any other brief questions by committee members? I don't see any. So maybe to just quickly say a few words to the question of Mr. Yu. Brain surgery definitely is not a good treatment option for autism, even if it has calmed down the son of your relative. I mean, basically that's lobotomization. So I think this is pretty much everyone would agree that that's not a good option. And I'm honestly surprised that this still is practiced. I have never heard about this happening until I heard about Brazil and now China. So we will definitely look into that, how widespread this still is. What the causes are of autism, that's up for discussion. There's a lot of research going on and no one really knows. It has a genetic component and it may have an environmental component. Whether it is air pollution or something else, no one really knows. There's no agreement on that. There's also no agreement on what the appropriate treatment would be. I think the important issue is to provide each individual on the autism spectrum individualized support. No two persons on the autism spectrum are exactly the same, and no two persons would respond to exactly the same kind of treatments or need the same kind of support and services necessarily as everyone else. So individualization is really what we would recommend here. And any approach, any treatment needs to be human rights conform, needs to be in conformity with the CRPD. So there should be no forced treatment. There should also, in our understanding, not be any treatment that is aimed at turning autistic persons into something that they are not, namely non-autistic. So any treatment needs to respect the identity of autistic persons. But we will be liaising with you directly and provide you contacts and information that you requested. Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, please allow me to conclude this side event by asking committee members to be vigilant about medical experimentation on autistic children without their consent. Internet vendors, clinics, doctors and parents exposing autistic children to harm must be held accountable. Please remind states parties to the CRPD of their responsibilities under Article 15 of the Convention. Autism awareness must lead to autism acceptance and an end to all medical experimentation on autistic children. Thank you.